China's growing global auto dominance has some lawmakers on edge.
Get ready. This thing's coming and it's going to shake up the world.
The European Union started imposing tariffs on Chinese EVs.
China has made a bold move by challenging the European Union at the World Trade Organization after the EU imposed heavy tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. These tariffs, which can reach up to 37.6%, are intended to shield European car makers from cheaper Chinese imports, which the EU claims benefit unfairly from government subsidies. How will Europe handle the pressure from China's latest move? Join us as we dive deep into this emerging storm, which may serve as a beginning to the next big tech war. China strikes back at electric vehicle tariffs. The tension between China and the European Union revolves around tariffs on electric vehicles. It's a complex situation involving various numbers, policies, and international disputes. On August 9, 2024, China formally objected to these tariffs at the World Trade Organization, opposing the EU's temporary measures that range from 17.4% to 37.6%. The European Commission argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect EU businesses from what it sees as unfair competition. They claim that subsidies from the Chinese government allow their companies to offer lower prices, which puts European manufacturers at a disadvantage. China, on the other hand, insists that its support for the electric vehicle industry complies with WTO rules. This dispute is a classic example of a trade conflict. The EU's initial actions were based on an investigation suggesting that certain Chinese electric vehicle makers received too much help from the government. The tariffs differ depending on the company. For instance, the state-owned carmaker SAIC faces the highest rate at 37.6%, while others like BYD face lower rates of 17.4%. These measures are set to last for 5 years, adding to the existing 10% duty on Chinese car imports to the EU. But the story doesn't end there. These tariffs aren't just about protecting jobs. They're also a key part of the EU's plan to lead the shift toward greener technologies. However, this could mean higher prices for electric vehicles in Europe, creating a tough choice between supporting local industries and keeping cars affordable for the people they want to protect. In response to the EU's decision, China quickly filed a complaint with the WTO, arguing that these tariffs violate international trade rules. The ongoing dispute between the European Union and China over electric vehicles is becoming a significant issue that could disrupt global trade. The conflict centers around new tariffs the EU has imposed on Chinese EVs. Many see these tariffs as unfair and potentially damaging to international efforts to advance green technology. The EU claims that these tariffs are necessary to protect European car manufacturers from what they perceive as aggressive pricing strategies by Chinese companies. However, China strongly disagrees. A representative from China's Ministry of Commerce described the EU's actions as baseless and legally questionable, warning that they could slow down global progress in environmental efforts. This dispute is not just about trade policies. It's about the larger question of who will lead the future of sustainable technology. China is making it clear that it will defend its position in the EV market, viewing this as crucial to its economic future and its role in the global movement towards greener technologies. Looking at the bigger picture, this issue goes beyond just China and the EU. It's becoming a key factor in how several countries are rethinking their economic relationships with China. The United States has already imposed significant tariffs on various Chinese goods for similar reasons, and Canada is also considering its own set of tariffs. Within the EU, opinions vary. Some countries support the tariffs, believing they are necessary to protect jobs and local industries. Others worry that these protectionist measures could backfire, leading to higher costs for European consumers and slowing down the transition to green energy. This debate is particularly important for Germany, which has a strong automotive industry and close economic ties with China. If relations between the EU and China worsen, it could have serious consequences for Germany's economy. China's recent decision to start trade investigations against the European Union marks a new level of tension between these two major economic players. This move comes after the EU decided to put tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, arguing that these cars benefited from significant government support. In response, China has started investigating some key EU exports, such as French cognac and European pork. These investigations are seen as a direct reaction to the EU's actions and could lead to more trade barriers. China's specific investigations include looking into whether the EU is unfairly subsidizing its dairy products and whether EU pork and French brandies are being sold at unfairly low prices. The dairy investigation covers a range of products like cheese and milk, focusing on the subsidies provided by several EU countries, including Austria, Belgium, and Italy. These products are important exports from the EU to China, and the investigations are expected to closely examine how subsidies are used across these countries. This move is widely seen as a form of retaliation for the EU's tariffs on Chinese EVs, showing how interconnected global trade disputes can be. In addition to these investigations, China is also taking its case to the World Trade Organization, arguing that the EU's tariffs on its EVs are against WTO rules and disrupt global efforts to cooperate on green technologies. This legal challenge highlights the broader geopolitical impact of trade policies, which go beyond just the relationship between China and the EU, potentially affecting global economic and environmental strategies. But this isn't the only issue at hand. This situation shows just how complicated international trade can be, where economic actions can trigger widespread diplomatic and economic consequences, affecting various industries across multiple countries. As we wrap up this chapter on the escalating trade dispute, let's turn our attention to how these international tensions could reshape global economic alliances in the next chapter. EU's investigation into Chinese electric cars. Experts are divided on what these developments mean. Some, like Jian Junbo from Fudan University, believe China's response is justified and argue for a more cooperative approach to create a fair and competitive EV market. Others, such as Ku Dongshu from the China Passenger Car Association, see the EU's tariffs as an attempt to suppress Chinese competitors under the guise of fairness. But this is not the worst part. This unfolding situation illustrates how deeply intertwined economic interests, national policies, and global sustainability goals are. The outcome of this conflict could reshape international trade and cooperation in the green technology era. Over time, this situation might actually slow down creativity and limit the variety of products available to people. Let's take a broader look at what's happening in the electric vehicle sector. China has become a major player, with its automobile exports significantly increasing in July 2024. Reports show a big jump in sales overseas compared to the previous year, even though sales within the country have dropped. While things are slowing down domestically, China is making strong progress on the global stage. Meanwhile, the European Union is determined to stay at the forefront of green technology. The competition is fierce, with both regions heavily investing in EV technologies, trying to lead the market as the world shifts towards renewable energy. But the situation gets complicated by tariffs and trade disputes that disrupt smooth cooperation. As the situation evolves, both China and the EU need to think carefully about their next steps. The EU is weighing its options after China's complaint to the World Trade Organization, with the next few months being crucial. They have until early November to resolve these issues before temporary tariffs become permanent. The decisions made now could reshape the EV market and impact global trade for years to come. Both sides need to handle this carefully, balancing the protection of local industries with the need for international cooperation. This discussion is about more than just cars. It's about the future of technology, jobs, and environmental sustainability. As the story continues to unfold, it's clear that the conversation around trade and sustainability is just beginning. Hopefully, the upcoming negotiations will bring results that work for everyone involved. After all, we're all in this together as part of the global community. This situation highlights the ongoing tension between the two regions, which could potentially turn into a trade conflict. Last year, Europe had a large trade imbalance with China, with a deficit of almost 300 billion euros. The EU is now working to reduce this gap. One major area of concern is the car industry, especially electric vehicles. Authorities in Brussels, along with car executives from German cities like Stuttgart, Munich, and Wolfsburg, are feeling anxious as they wait for the EU's investigation into China's support for its electric car industry. This investigation, started by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen last autumn, is expected to reach an important stage soon. But that's not the worst part. By early June, the EU might decide to impose preliminary tariffs, which could make trade tensions even worse. This would happen right before the European elections scheduled for June 6 to 9th, making trade a hot topic of discussion during the election period. Beijing has responded to France's decision to investigate electric vehicles by launching its own investigation into European alcoholic drinks, with a focus on French cognac. This back and forth comes at a time when Chinese electric cars are rapidly increasing their presence in the European market. In fact, by 2023, over 430,000 Chinese EVs were being sold in Europe each year, valued at around $10 billion. Meanwhile, Europe exports very few electric vehicles to China, raising concerns in Brussels that the flood of Chinese cars might overwhelm the European market and put local car makers at risk. The European Union is worried that Chinese EV manufacturers like BYD might be benefiting from government subsidies. To level the playing field, the EU is considering increasing import duties on these cars. Right now, all imported cars face a 10% tariff, but some experts from the Rhodium Group suggest raising this to 50% to ensure fair competition. The investigation into electric vehicles is particularly tricky for the European Commission because EVs are complex products. Their production involves a lot of different industries and countries, making the supply chains quite complicated. This inquiry is a big deal because it's one of the rare times the EU has started such an investigation without being asked by the industry directly. This move shows the EU's determination to address trade imbalances and ensure fair competition in the market. But the challenge doesn't end here. The situation is likely to become even more complicated as both sides continue to take actions that impact trade and economic relations. The European Union is taking a close look at how it can encourage battery production, car design, and steel supplies within Europe. This focus comes as Chinese car manufacturers are advancing rapidly, often with help from partnerships with European companies. Big German car makers like Mercedes, Volkswagen, and BMW all have factories in China and depend on the world's largest car market for a large part of their earnings. But not everyone in Europe's auto industry is happy about the EU's decision to start this investigation. Europe argues that China has invested so much money that it has created too much production capacity. Brussels, echoing global economic experts, believes that instead of flooding international markets with extra products, Beijing should work on boosting domestic consumer demand. Meanwhile, the United States has taken even stronger actions. President Joe Biden has sharply raised import taxes on Chinese electric vehicles to 100%, a significant increase reflecting growing tensions between the two countries. Despite this, Chinese car makers have barely entered the US market but are quickly expanding in Europe. This year, the EU has launched several other investigations. Recent cases involve steel pipes, the food additive lysine, and the flavoring agent vanillin, making a total of 13 investigations. While these may not be as high profile as the electric vehicle case, they're still likely to catch China's attention and could impact future trade relations. These actions show that the EU is serious about addressing trade imbalances and controlling the flow of foreign products that might harm local industries. Moving forward, the decisions made in these trade disputes will define the next era of international cooperation. The impact on Europe's car and cognac markets. Europe has been using various economic strategies, like trade rules and competition laws, to push back against Chinese companies trying to win contracts for building wind parks in Europe and selling airport security devices. Europe is also keeping a close eye on how China is buying medical equipment from other countries. In response, China sees France as the main force behind an investigation into electric vehicles. Because of this, China has started its own investigation into European products, focusing on French cognac, accusing it of unfair pricing. Recently, during a meeting between French President Emmanuel Macron and Chinese President Xi Jinping, Macron announced that China was not planning to impose immediate tariffs on French cognac. However, people in the cognac industry are still worried they might get caught in the middle of this bigger economic fight over electric vehicles. Now, China's attention has turned to the German car industry. Liu Bin, a key advisor in China's automotive sector, mentioned in an interview that China should consider a temporary 25% tariff on high-end European cars with big engines. This move would mainly target luxury brands like Porsche, known for their sports cars and SUVs. Even with these potential problems, experts like Matthias Schmidt, who knows the European car market well, think that German luxury car makers can handle this challenge. These luxury cars can either raise their prices slightly or accept a small dip in profit margins while still making money. In the same way, it's expected that Chinese exporters will be able to deal with the outcomes of the EU's ongoing investigation into subsidies and continue to compete, even with new regulations in place. But this isn't the biggest issue. They also have to consider how these tensions might affect other industries, which could lead to even more complications. The situation is still developing, and both sides are watching closely to see what happens next. Jürgen Mathes, an economist from the German Institute for Economic Research, believes that people shouldn't worry too much about major financial impacts. The role of car exports in the economy is shrinking, now making up just 0.3% of the total GDP. Additionally, the tariffs that Beijing plans to impose on luxury cars will likely have only a small effect on these numbers. On top of that, major battery maker CATL and electric vehicle giant BYD are setting up factories in Hungary. Their plan is straightforward: to avoid the upcoming European Union tariffs. A similar strategy is being used in Mexico, where they aim to dodge US tariffs. This situation is reminiscent of a conflict from more than a decade ago, when the European Union was about to impose heavy duties of 48% on Chinese-made solar panels. European producers were struggling because these cheaper imports were flooding the market. Laurent Roussman, a trade lawyer with experience working with European solar companies, pointed out China's clever approach. He noted that the Chinese government is skilled at indirectly shaping European policies by focusing on key industries. In the past, it was the German car industry, and now similar pressure is being put on French cognac producers. The goal is to get these industries to persuade French President Macron to give in to China's demands, showing a pattern in China's approach to international trade. Over a decade ago, the European Union decided to place high taxes, specifically 48%, on solar panels imported from China. The main reason behind this decision was that these imports were significantly hurting the EU's ability to produce its own solar panels. This action has led some people to wonder if this could be seen as the start of a trade war. Different people have different views on this issue. For a while now, European officials have been coming up with new ways to describe their efforts to reduce dependence on certain countries for goods. One term that's been gaining popularity is de-risking. Officials in both Europe and Beijing insist they are following the rules set by the World Trade Organization. They argue that the EU is simply trying to maintain a trading system that is fair and based on solid evidence. Since the idea of a trade war is closely tied to politics, the EU consistently claims that it is not trying to start any conflicts. Meanwhile, Beijing's response is also shaped by the current global political climate. With the possibility of Donald Trump returning to the US presidency later this year, which could put a strain on the relationship between the US and Europe, Beijing may want to avoid escalating tensions with Europe at this time. This perspective comes from a high-ranking European diplomat who spoke anonymously to express their views openly. The diplomat suggested that China is thinking carefully about the future. They believe that if they can just wait until a possible change in the US presidency, European governments might feel increased pressure from their business communities to rebuild closer ties with Beijing. But the real challenge is yet to come, and it may not be what anyone expects. What do you think will be the long-term impact of these tariffs on global trade and technological innovation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.